Junior doctors are out on a 3-day strike as they fight for pay restoration after 15 years of real terms pay cuts. As a result, Health Minister Victoria Atkins has been doing the media rounds. Speaking to the BBC, she explained how negotiations with the medics have been going.
Within 24 hours of being appointed by the Prime Minister, I called the BMA in, all of the committees, the chairs of the committees, to say to them, look, I would like us to work together. And we have managed, through hard work and through compromise, to find an offer that I hope will be accepted by consultants. And we've managed to find a fair and reasonable settlement for specialty doctors as well. The last cohort is that of junior doctors, or doctors in training, as I prefer to call them. And they, sadly, to my great disappointment, they walked out of our negotiations and then called these strikes. And so I have said time and time again that if they call off the strikes, then I will be straight back round the negotiating table with them.
That phrase, doctors in training, caused a bit of outrage on social media. But according to the BMA, they actually prefer it to junior doctor, which a spokesperson called, quote, infantilizing. Of course, Atkins wasn't using doctors in training to bestow more dignity on the medics on strike. She was perhaps using it to suggest they're not fully qualified, which is just outright false. But the storm over nomenclature meant that a lot of people missed another point of Atkins's account, the bit where she said doctors had walked out of negotiations. The BMA has now responded to that, saying this. Throughout negotiations with the government, we had a mutually agreed deadline for them to make a credible offer. This deadline passed, and we were therefore forced to call strikes. We did not walk away from negotiations, and we are happy to talk to Ms. Atkins at any time. It is the government's insistence that they will not talk while strikes are scheduled that is blocking progress and wasting unnecessary time. We appealed directly to Ms. Atkins and the government to drop this precondition and get back around the table. In another interview, Atkins appeared to be stoking rebellion amongst the junior doctors.
The Junior Doctors Committee decided the date of their strikes. So they decided to do it 3 days in the run-up to Christmas, and they have also now picked the worst week in the NHS's calendar on which to be on strike. Now, there will be many, many doctors listening to this who feel deeply uncomfortable that their committee has called these strikes at this time. And I would encourage anyone who feels like that quietly to consider whether this committee is in fact representing their views.
The BMA has now also responded to that claim too. This is what they say. We'd also ask Ms. Atkins what evidence she has to suggest that we do not represent the profession and how many of England's 70,000 plus junior doctors she has spoken to recently. Members of JDC are working junior doctors, elected by their peers and are engaging with thousands of colleagues across the country on a daily basis, and the profession remains united in support. Ms. Atkins may have forgotten that mandates are derived from democratic votes. In our February ballot, 98% voted for strike action on 77% turnout. This mandate was reconfirmed in August when 7,000 more junior doctors voted yes than they had in February. And compared to last December, we now have 15,000 more junior doctor members in England. Ms. Atkins may have forgotten that mandates are derived from democratic votes. That's a reminder likely to chill the bones of every Tory MP this Christmas. Helena, the government had been hoping to quell industrial action in the NHS with pay deals for nurses and for consultants. So why are they so determined to piss off junior doctors?
Well, the thing is that the NHS is a huge issue for voters amongst every single age group. It ranks in the top 3 issues looking into the next election about which party they'll support. And of course, massively failing for the Conservative Party, as they have continually been shown to be the party that cannot be trusted with the NHS. Speaking of trust, doctors and medical staff are among the most trusted professions in the country. Doctors rank the highest on that metric, and politicians and journalists rank the lowest.
Yeah, I don't want to know where journalists sit. I don't want to know.
Exactly. But with regards to that, it means that you really and truly, unless they find a scapegoat for the NHS failures, they have no defence for the position that they've got the NHS into, right? People are already realising that you can't blame the pandemic when waiting lists were already rising before the pandemic. And whilst, some parts of the other NHS have accepted pay deals, they've accepted pay deals around of what has already been offered to junior doctors, although junior doctors have had a worse pay decrease in real terms in these other professions, which is why they're asking for more. It's why they start at 35% for pay restoration, and nurses only started with 25%. Also worth remembering that the nurses deal was only closed for the Agenda for Change deal because Unison tried to get, and the RCN tried to, they ratified essentially the Conservative Party deal and endorsed it. So the nurses accepted it when I believe they shouldn't have done. They should have continued industrial action to try and get a better pay offer, which has undermined the negotiating position of other sectors of the NHS as well. But by trying to create this difference between the accepted pay deal and the current demands from the junior doctors, you always get this term militancy thrown around. Now, I was watching Politics Live a couple of days ago with Novara's Moyloathan McLean on it. She performed very well, as always. And just the idea that the junior doctors might want a pay rise that would be above inflation or meeting inflation, or anything close to pay restoration, is somehow evidence of their quote unquote militancy. Therefore, they can't be trusted and they are activists rather than people seeking to, but not only to increase their own pay, but to save the NHS. That is what these strikes are about. They understand that the lack of recruitment and retention is a gigantic failure of the Conservative governments, given their squeeze on doctors' pay. And doctors aren't just striking because they want more pay, although that would be nice, so they don't have to move to another country that could offer them more, because we don't want to lose them, spend all that money educating them to lose them to another country. It'd be terrible. And so they're striking, saying, well, the future of the NHS depends on solving these recruitment and retention issues. And the government don't want to admit that. So by smearing the junior doctors as being the militant ones in comparison to everybody else, it not just undermines their negotiating position, it not just tries to paint them as the people who can be blamed for the NHS failures that we're seeing right now, and Sunak's been very clear about trying to paint them as the villain, causing the waiting lists to increase. But on top of that, it signals to other sectors of the economy that if they want to agitate for fair pay increases, pay restoration, pay rises above inflation, then they are also militants too, who can therefore have all of their positions and all of their desires and negotiating positions undermined.